Hey everyone, this is Josh Lockheed, Training Evangelist here at QuoteWerks. Hope you're having a great day. I have along with me here today Brian Laufer, Vice President at QuoteWerks. He's going to be assisting throughout the course of this webinar in answering questions and adding some color where it may need to be added. I want to welcome you here as today we'll be talking about specifically QuoteWerks Web and the integration with Act for Web. We do have an existing integration for Act for Web in our desktop product, but this new release of the QuoteWerks Web Act for Web integration has come out in our version 25 release. Now, our version 25 release is a release that signifies a lot of hard work from the QuoteWerks team here. I just want to mention that we do have a full release webinar coming up on 12/17. So if you have interest, I'd love to see you there, and we'll review all of the wonderful things that are included in that release, actually including this integration as well. But we're going to dig a little bit deeper today. And before we get started, I just want to point out the fact that we have the ability to interact with you via the platform GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar, excuse me. So there's the questions box that's available to you. And if at any point you want to ask a question throughout the course of this webinar, just go ahead, click on that questions box, type in your question. If I see it, I'll answer it. If Brian sees it, he can bubble it up to me if I'm in the middle of something. And if at any point throughout the course of the webinar, you have a question that is not answered, or let's say you get out of the webinar and you think of something that you'd like to have answered, you can always reach out to us, give us a phone call, or we have the community@quoteworks.com email address as well. All right, so to get started here today, I want to make a couple points of clarification. Today we're talking about the integration of the web version of Act, which we refer to as Act for Web. And that's regardless of whether or not using hosted on-premise or with Act Cloud. Now, I again want to mention the fact that our desktop product does support Act for Web, and it does also support Act for Desktop. We're here today talking about, again, how QuoteWerks Web integrates specifically with the web version of Act, which we'll talk about as Act for Web. And again, just to simplify things a little bit more, if you hear me referring to QuoteWerks, I'm referring to QuoteWerks Web. If you hear me referring to Act, I'm referring to Act for Web. So again, just a quick note there. Now we're going to start our conversation today to just generally review the breadth of the integration, and we'll get a little bit deeper into each of these existing points. Before we talk about the features, though, I just want to point out that it does require a corporate license of QuoteWerks. And since we are demoing the QuoteWerks Web version of our integration, we also require a QuoteWerks Web license. Now with this integration, you're able to leverage your existing Act contacts, create new Act contacts from within QuoteWerks, automatically create or update Act opportunities. You can even associate quotes in QuoteWerks to an existing Act opportunity, so it doesn't necessarily have to start in QuoteWerks. You can also create follow-up activities like calls, meetings, and to-dos. And with the process of creating an opportunity in Act, QuoteWerks actually creates products and services in Act as well, so you can go and view that information directly in Act. And then we also attach PDFs and other documents to Act so people in your organization can view these quotes if they don't have QuoteWerks. And then there's another file format that's included that I'll show you that individuals can open natively in QuoteWerks as well. So I think this sets the table for what we can do. The next slide that I have here is going to talk a little bit about the general process of how you might create a quote in QuoteWerks and then maps where the integration points are with Act for Web. So within QuoteWerks, the quote creation, delivery, and conversion process is generally the same regardless of what CRM, PSA you're using. And it includes the process of selecting a contact that you want that quote to be sent to, populating that quote with products, making some level of customization to that quote, whether it's changing pricing, creating specific line items like heading line items, section headers, or subtotals. There's really a ton of things that you can do to customize your quotes. But once you've got that quote together in a format that you're ready to send to the customer, you can save that quote. You're going to make additional changes to that quote, and you might go through a couple iterations of changing that quote before finally the customer signs off on it, either by accepting it via Quote Valet or by just giving you a verbal confirmation. Walking through this again one more time, we're going to talk about where in this process each of the integration points are. And the first point of integration for Act for Web is when you're selecting that contact for your quote, you can actually query your existing Act contact database. So rather than coming in and having to type in all their contact information, you can actually go in, search that database, and pull in a contact. Additionally, if you're working with a new customer for the first time and they don't already exist in the ACT database, you can create that company and contact directly in QuoteWerks and then have it create that contact for you in ACT as well. So a couple time-saving pieces there that the integration provides. Selecting products is the next step, and we're going to actually review how you might do that. Customizing the quote, we're not going to really get too much into today, but when we talk about the next point or integration point for ACT for Web, we're talking about when you go and save the quote. Every time you save the quote, you're going to get a pop-up that gives you the opportunity to either create a new opportunity or update an existing opportunity. Now, when you're saving the quote for the first time, you can associate your quote with an opportunity again that is already existing in ACT for Web, or you could potentially create an entirely new opportunity in ACT for Web based on the quote. As I mentioned before, when you save these quotes, QuoteWerks is going to go through the process of sending over the products and services that are included on your quote into the opportunity so you can view them at any time. Now, again, in most cases, you're going to have one round or maybe multiple rounds of conversations with the customer. They might come back and say they want a couple more of these, 2 less of these. There's going to be some level of changes that you're going to make. When you make those changes to the quote, and anytime you go to save that quote again, it's actually going to go back and give you the opportunity to update the opportunity. And when you save that quote as well, it's going to update any of the product or service changes that you've made through the course of working with that quote. At the time of customer acceptance, again, let's say that they've either accepted via quote file A or just given you the verbal go ahead on that quote. When that order is converted, so that quote is converted to an order, the QuoteWerks system is going to give you a prompt that gives you the opportunity to convert that opportunity that's associated with the quote to one in ACT as well. So again, this is just a high-level overview of the general process of creating a quote, saving a quote, sending it to the customer, and converting that quote and the integration points through the ACT system. We're going to now get into a bit of a demo of how all that's done. But before I do, I'm going to take a quick look. There's no questions that we have yet, so we will continue to move on. But again, if you do have any questions that come up, please feel free to enter them there. And I am going to hop over into QuoteWerks Web. So for those of you that have been in QuoteWerks Web before, this will look familiar to you. This is the workspace. And you can see in the top right here, I'm logged in as an administrator. What I'm going to do here is to create a new document. And I do that by going to the document section and hitting new. And as I mentioned, the first thing that we want to do here is to associate a contact with this particular quote. So I'm going to go to the Sold to, Shipped to tab, because that's how you would do that in QuoteWerks. There are really 2 main ways that you can add a contact to the system. One of them is you can come in and just add their information here, the name of the company, contact, title, address, so on and so forth. Or you can also, as I mentioned before, search the ACT for Web database. You also have the opportunity to create a contact directly from QuoteWerks through this screen, utilizing this N button here. So I want to populate this field here, and what I'm going to do is actually use a new feature that is also recently released, where you have the ability to take an address from your clipboard and paste it into your Sold to, Shipped to, and Bill to fields. So as you can see here, I've got, let's say, a new customer that I've never sold to before. I've got the name of the company, their name, title, address, phone, and email. And what I can do is copy it here, come back over into any of these fields. You'll see they all have this paste from clipboard button, and I can paste that contact information in here. The great thing about this is that you can see it wasn't exactly formatted, or there's no designation that said that each line should be put in what field here on the screen. So it's a little bit of magic that goes on the background to determine what field should go where. And again, it's just another time-saving tool that you have. But the reason I wanted to put this new contact information in here is because you'll notice that this new button went from being grayed out to now being available for me to select. So if I actually click this new button, it's going to create this company, which is actually already an existing company in Act. So apparently my testing, I may have already created this particular company. However, just want to point out that if this was a new company, it would create it. And you can see that if it is a existing company, it's not going to create it. So in this case, if we were to go in and maybe change it by 1 digit, we can see that go through and the new company record has now been added. Now that might not be something that you want to do just based on your naming conventions. For example, in this case, I just added an S to the end of the company, but all intents and purposes, if you had someone that you wanted to create company and contact for in Act, it's as simple as doing that. Now I'm going to actually wipe out this contact information by using the wiper blade here and clearing those fields. And I'm going to show you how you can search for a contact using the other method, which is by coming over to this magnifying glass and clicking on it. Now I was already searching for a contact earlier here, so it already has it up here, but I want to just point the fact that we have the ability to search using the name, phone, company name and phone, contact first name and last name, and contact phone. And you can use operators contains and start with, and it'll also display secondary if you select here. So in this case, again, I was searching for computer hut. You can see our new computer connections is now listed here as well. But again, I'm going to use our contact Ryan Dan at Computer Hut, and I have the ability to add them to our sold to, shipped to, or billed to fields respectively. But I'm going to use the all button to add them to all of our fields here. Great. So we've now accomplished the first step in our process and our workflow, which again is adding a contact to the document. The next step is going to be adding products. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and reference a bundle that I've created, and this is just a logical association of different products that are often sold together in a kit or bundle. And you can see in just a couple of clicks, I'm able to go through and call upon my bundle here, which is actually a build for a standard desktop build out. Got a desktop, a couple monitors, and peripherals as well. Now, alternatively, if I wanted to actually go and query product databases, I could just go and add individual products utilizing the product icon. And here I can both search from Utilize using the product content subscription, or I can go into my individual product databases. And those could be connected CRM PSAs or QuickBooks databases in this case, or even QuoteWerks native databases as well. So I just wanted to point out the fact that you have a little bit extra capability here rather than just going in and using a bundle. Now, if I want to return back to that document that I was working on, I could X out of here, but I could always just click on the workspace button as well, and it's going to bring me back over here. So now we've got our contact, we've got our products. The next step would be logically to save this document, and this again is where we start to get into the true integration with Act for Web. So when I hit save, it brings up our window here, which is the save quote window, and we have the ability to change the name if we want, but this is being created based on a default that's set up in the system. For the purposes of today, I'm just going to put computer build as the title, and we're going to have a doc number, status, and project number assigned here automatically if we'd like. We could also go in there and change those as well. Now, when it comes to the Act for Web integration, there are a couple things that you can do. We already talked about the fact that you could create a sales opportunity. A linked document will automatically be created. You can see it's grayed out here when you create an opportunity, and we'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. And you also have the ability to create the follow-up calls, meetings, and to-dos, which I'm going to go ahead and select all of those just to show you the process for those. Another thing to point out on this window is that we have the Act for Web status, and you can see I'm currently online. If at any point you're working within the QuoteWerks system and you didn't want to feed this information into Act for Web for whatever reason, all you'd need to do is go ahead and click I'm offline, and you'll see these different boxes are grayed out and they can't be selected. Obviously, for the purposes of today's presentation, I'm going to be online because I want to communicate with Act, and I'm going to have all of those selected. So when I hit OK, what we're going to do is we're actually going out to Act and we're pulling in some information. So as I mentioned, we can either create a new opportunity or we can connect it to an existing opportunity inside of Act. So the opportunities that are being listed here are opportunities that exist in Act, And we can actually associate what we have here in our quote to that existing opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and create a new opportunity, but again, that's another option that you have. The name is going to default to whatever the name was for the document along with the document number. You could always edit it here if you'd like. And you also have the ability to choose the process. This is all pulling from ACT. Choose the stage, the probability, and the estimated close date. So for estimated close date, we're going to go ahead and say that this is going to potentially close on the 3rd of January. Gives us about 3 weeks to a month to get everything in order. And we can put some notes in here. And these would just be notes that would be included in the opportunity. It could be really anything that helps to inform how you might work that opportunity. We also have the ability to choose a competitor, and that competitor is also being pulled from ACT for web. Now that we have everything set here, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And it's going to move on to the next step in the creation process, which is now creating our web call activity. So this call activity, we could say that we want to follow up with this customer at the end of the week. We'll say we want to give them a call tomorrow, which I just realized is Friday the 13th. And we'll say we want to do that at, let's say, 11 a.m. With our activities, we do have the opportunity to come in and set different things like our duration of the call. We can put a specific regarding statement here, which is defaulted as the document number and the document title. We can set a priority, and we can also set a ring alarm. So in this case, I'm just going to say reach out to customer to confirm they have reviewed the quote. Awesome. So again, what this is doing is creating a call activity in ACT for Web. So we'll hit OK. And as we selected, we also have a meeting activity that we'd like to create. In this case, again, we said we're going to follow up with them by phone tomorrow. Let's say that we actually wanted to meet with them in person on the 20th. We can choose that date. We'll again say this is going to be around midday, and we'll say this is going to be a 30-minute presentation. You can change all of the different fields here as you would like, and we'll put here, this is time to present and solicit feedback. Great. So that is a meeting activity. We also selected that we wanted to schedule a to-do activity, and this can be really for anything regarding to the deal. But I'm going to go ahead and say we'll at 10 o'clock in the morning on the 16th, we will reach out to the services team to schedule service. All right. Now, one of the really cool things about the ACT for Web integration is next logical step that you would think is, oh, I got to log out of ACT for Web, or excuse me, log out of QuoteWerks Web, log into ACT for Web. Well, we make it really easy for you in that now that the opportunity has been created, if you click on the Links tab, over here on the right, you'll see that we can link to the sold to, shipped to, or billed to company. And we also have a link to the opportunity in ACT for Web. So I'm going to go ahead and click that link, and it's going to bring us directly to that opportunity in ACT for Web. You can see there's a lot of different stuff that's been ported over. We have the name of our opportunity here. We have the total projected amount. We have the estimated close date, as well as our product information that's all down here. So you can see all the products, their SKUs, their quantities, costs, price, discount, all came over from our system. We also have the process and stage. So if you remember, we set our process and stage, it's all been ported over here. I also want to point out the fact that on this opportunity, we have an activities section, and this denotes the 3 different activities that we've just created. So those are all there and associated with this opportunity. On the history tab, this is going to show us that this new opportunity has just been created, and you're actually also going to see some communications with the customer just generally. It might not be associated with this opportunity, but just general communication that's been recent with this customer, so that you can make sure that you're not crossing wires or that you're really focusing your conversations and taking into account previous conversations you may have had with the customer. And then last but not least, we have this Documents tab. And as I mentioned, one of the features of the integration is the ability to create attachments on the opportunity. Well, this is the default attachments that's created at time of opportunity creation, and that's the DTF file format. And you can see that this particular file also has the quote number. Now, the DTF file format is the file that's used to open QuoteWerks quotes in QuoteWerks. So if anybody that has access to this opportunity wanted to open this quote in QuoteWerks, they could do so by using this DTF file. So it's a great opportunity to be able to access not just the opportunity, but go into the actual quote and see what's there and potentially make changes if that's something that you'd like to do. So that is the process of opportunity creation, and this is what's created in Act for Web. If we go back into QuoteWerks, I just want to point out the fact that there's another way that we're adding information into that integration, and that's if you are emailing, downloading PDFs, or doing other activity that is sharing documents with your customers, that information is going to be logged in the opportunity as well. And I'll show you an example of that. If we were to go to Deliver and choose a quote layout and email this particular quote, you can see right now this particular email is really not formatted. We don't have any inputs there. But if you wanted and you're not using Quote Valet, just sending quotes via email, you could certainly create different templates that would have standard text that you could add into this. But again, just for the purpose of today, I'm not going to worry about the contents of the email. What I'm really concerned with is this PDF here. So I'm going to hit send. And now that I've hit send, if we go back to the opportunity, I'm just going to go ahead and refresh it. If we go back to our Documents tab, you'll see not only do we have the DTF file, but we also have our PDF file there as well. So every time you're sharing a PDF with the customer or downloading that PDF, it's going to come here and be available to you and anyone else that has access to this opportunity. Likewise, in the history, you're going to have a recording or a record of that particular communication. So if at any point you want to go back and again review the history of this opportunity, you can easily do that. All right. So that is a really good overview, I think, of the general function of the integration. I don't see any questions there, but I'll remind everyone again, if you do have any questions, feel free to enter them into the questions box, and I'll address them as they come in. Moving back over into the presentation, we're now going to talk about the setup of the integration within QuoteWerks. So we kind of started with the shiny, fancy, how do you use this integration? And now we're moving into how do you make it so that it actually does all the things that it just did? And there's a couple of key pieces of information that we're going to take into account. You need your ACT credentials, and this is going to be platform dependent. So whether or not you're self-hosted or hosted via ACT, those are going to be two different sets of credentials. You're going to want to make sure that you have those credentials included in the My Preferences Contact Manager page. There is also another section within the integration where you can update those credentials, but you just want to make sure that every individual that is accessing the Act for Web integration has the appropriate credentials associated with their account. And then under the CRM integrations heading, we can go in and work with different tabs that are there regarding the Act for Web opportunity. And those are going to be general settings, settings regarding the opportunities, settings regarding our activities, and then settings regarding the attachments as well. I just want to point out a couple prerequisites here. Before you set up the integration, you want to make sure that you have your Act for Web service URL. And you want to make sure that you have your database for both premise and hosted, but you're going to need that virtual directory for on-premise as well. And then, as I've already alluded to, you need to ensure that you have your user credentials. So those are the three pieces of information that you need to ensure before you go and start to do what we're going to be demonstrating here in just a moment. So hopping back over into QuoteWerks Web, as I mentioned, we can come in and set up this particular integration, and there's actually two ways that we can do that. The first way is over here on the left, we can go to Setup CRM Integrations, or we can go to Contacts, Setup Contact Manager, and that's going to bring us to the same place. The first thing you want to do when you're setting up the integration is you're going to want to use this drop-down menu and select Act for Web. You'll want to hit OK, and that'll save it if it's your first time changing to Act for Web. And then you're going to want to hit on Act for Web and go into the Act for Web setup screen. You'll see that we do have a link to our help topic for the Act for Web integration. And I'll just note now that there are significant resources on our help files and some videos out there as well that you can reference if you're looking to set up this integration or use the integration yourself. So welcome you to view those. And then on this page, we have the ability to choose our connection type. In this case, I'm using cloud-based, but if you're using on-premise, you could easily toggle, and you'll see the virtual directory is required for on-premise, but that's really the only difference between the two. You'll see here that I'm including my Act for Web service URL, as well as my database, and then here are the credentials for the administrator account. Now again, just mentioning that while these are included here on this page, if you go to My Preferences Contact Manager, you can also input them here. If we scroll down a little bit more, we get to the integration settings and data link, which we'll talk about in just a moment. I see that there are some questions that came in, and it looks like, Brian, you answered them. So
yeah, and we'll get to those a little bit later as well. They're great questions that
okay.
Everybody will be able to use. It's just let's focus on the setup, I think, for right now.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Brian. So the next step, as I mentioned here, is going to be integration settings. And these are where the four areas that we discussed on the slides previously are going to be. First is general. And this is just saying if the contact does not have an address, then we're going to use the associated accounts, either main, shipping, or billing address. Pretty straightforward there. Where the true integration comes in, and these are the gotchas or the important pieces of the integration, are going to be under the opportunity section, because this is going to handle how your opportunities are created, managed, so on and so forth. So the first option that we have here is completion of existing opportunity to 1. So when do we want to mark that opportunity in Act for Web as 1? Currently, we have it set as when we're converting a quote to an order, but we could also have it set to converting to an invoice, or if we did not want to convert orders automatically when they are, convert opportunities to 1 when orders are converted automatically, we would just hit never. We do have the opportunity here to allow someone to be prompted to create an opportunity, even if there's no sales opportunity that exists. And we also have a setting here that would cause it not to remove existing companies or contacts from opportunities, even if you're changing that on the QuoteWerks side. Now, also very important here when we're talking about opportunities is how you want that information reflected on the opportunity when it comes to the products. So here you have the opportunity to write a single summary line into the Act for Web opportunity. When that happens, you're just going to get one line that's going to have a product number of QW roll-up product, and it's going to show you the total of that opportunity. You could also choose to make it just a profit amount if in case of using the sales amount. But in the case of our integration, and for most of our customers, we're going to want to have that granularity that we just saw and being able to see the part numbers, see what they're being sold for. And in order to do that, we just need to make sure that we're mapping a particular QuoteWerks field to the Act for Web item number. Now, a large majority of you are going to utilize manufacturer part number because that's the unique identifier that we use in the QuoteWerks system. But you could choose from any number of fields that we have in the QuoteWerks system. And if you choose something other than manufacturer part number, you're also going to want to choose here generate options. And this is actually whether or not you're using manufacturer part numbers or not. This is going to, if you don't have a part number there, either nothing, auto generate using a macro. So generate that part number using any number of different fields that we have available. Or the third option that we have there is to auto-generate using a macro based on the QuoteWerks item type. So again, same thing as auto-generating using a macro, except the item type is going to use to determine what that macro is going to be. Now, regardless of what product mapping you do, whether it's manufacturer part number, vendor part number, custom text 01, we need an opportunity to handle items when they do not have a part number associated with them. And that's what this section does here. It's just saying if we have a product or service item that comes over, doesn't have a manufacturer part number associated with it, we're going to utilize this particular designation. Same thing with our group bundle header lines, discount items, charge lines, so on and so forth. And so we also have the ability to include item cost in the opportunity line items here as well. And that's pretty much what we have available to us from the opportunity section. Now, in addition to creating opportunities, as you saw, we also created default calls, meetings, and to-dos, and these are where we'll set those defaults. So if you remember back to when we created these different activities, we had the ability to set the priority, the ring alarm, duration, and you even have the ability to set the details here. So if you were to go in and change any of these are going to be the defaults that are now going to be set moving forward for any activities that you create. And you can set those granularly for your default call settings, your default meeting settings, as well as your default to-do settings. And last but not least on this page, we have the attachments section, which gives you the ability to toggle whether you'd like the files to be attached either to the opportunity or the contact. Again, opportunity is going to be what's used most often, but you do have that ability to connect it to the contact as well. So having done all of that, we're now ready to use the Act4Web integration. There's one other integration setting that we have here on this page, which is pretty consistent across all of our PSA CRM integrations, and that is DataLink. And DataLink gives you the opportunity to take data based on an action or event and read it into QuoteWerks from your CRM, or in some instances, write it out to an external system. Now, DataLink is a pretty complicated subject when it comes to how it functions and how you might want to use it, because there are a lot of use cases, but I want to distill it down to a pretty standard use case here that's easy to understand. So with our DataLink mapping, step one is going to be defining when we want this mapping to be triggered. So in this case, I'm just going to say when we retrieve our sold to information, what I want to do is I want to go into Act4Web and I want to read something into QuoteWerks. So in this case, I happen to know that we have a terms field here in Act4Web, and we also have a terms field in the QuoteWerks system. And for this purpose, what I'd like to do is when I retrieve my sold to information, I want those terms to automatically be written into the terms field in QuoteWerks. So I can come in and choose the terms field. And with this setup, when I hit OK, what that data link will do is anytime I go and retrieve my sold to information, we'll pull in those terms from Act4Web into the terms field in QuoteWerks. Now, that's just one niche use case. There's a ton of different things that you can do here. You can set up multiple data links, and again, if you want some more information on data links, we've got additional information in our help files, and I believe there's a couple of videos out there as well. But a very powerful tool, and just gives you another way to interact with the Act4Web system and utilize the integration. So that is the setup demo. I do have some resources I want to just point out to you, but I'll stop here as well, though, and see if we have any questions that we want to address here on the call. Brian, did you see any in particular that would be good to review?
First one here is from Mark, and the question is, does the quick copy and paste customer info work on the desktop version as well?
Yes, it does. That's a quick and easy one.
I like it. Yeah, the cool thing is whenever we're developing new features now, whether it's something that's supposed to be, we start off in desktop or we start off in web, the core business logic is going to be the same between them. All we have to do is change the UI. So pretty much moving forward, for the most part, within a short amount of time, anything that we add to desktop will be adding to web.
Yeah, and just kind of expand upon that, Brian, we're also getting to a point where we're sharing some of the resources too, right? So like in our recent release, we had the Quote Valet unified setup screen that was rolled out, which is actually the same screen that you use to set the settings for Quote Valet, and they're the same both on desktop and web. So yeah, again, just thought I'd expand on that a little bit.
Awesome. And then we also had a question here from Luke. What are the main differences between the desktop versions versus the web versions? And he's going very broad here with both QuoteWerks and Act.
Okay. Well, as it relates to the functionality for the QuoteWerks integration, there's not much difference between the two. The one thing that I can kind of think of is that you do have the ability in desktop to attach additional attachments at the time of opportunity creation, which is not something you can currently do in web. Again, we still have the DTF file and the PDFs that are being sent over as attachments, but that's really the only thing I can think of that you can't explicitly do. I don't know if there's anything that you can think of off the top of your head, Brian.
No, that's the only one that I had as well.
Yeah.
And then I'll take over the Act question.
Okay.
For that one, I would definitely reach out to Act support to see what the differences are, or if you've got an Act consultant or an ACC that you work with, definitely reach out to them as well. They'll be able to answer your Act question much better than we would. But as far as QuoteWerks is concerned, our integration for Act for Web is the same for the most part if you're using desktop or if you're using web of QuoteWerks.
Yep.
And that is the last question that I've got here.
Okay. Well, if you have any additional questions, feel free to pop them in there. I do want to point out a couple additional resources that you have available to you. As I've mentioned already, we have help files, documentation available publicly to you if you'd like to go and learn more about the products that we have here. QuoteWerks videos as well. I spend a good amount of my time creating videos on different topics. They're on the website, so feel free to go to the video section of the website and search there for whatever topic it might be that you're looking for. We also have the QuoteWerks forum. I like to point this out because this is a community place where you can go and share information with other users of the QuoteWerks software. Number of different things you can do there, but it's, again, just another resource that you have when it comes to getting information on QuoteWerks. We do have a regular webinar cadence. As I mentioned, on the 17th, we have our release webinar coming out as well. So keep your eyes peeled for future webinars as well. We also do have, and I think we had a poll question at the beginning of this call, a tips and tricks email. It's an email that goes out every month with just highlighting a different feature in QuoteWerks that might be useful to you and to other customers that may not be publicly, or the public might not be very much aware of that. So we try to highlight things that maybe aren't used that often, but can add a lot of value to your business. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have the community@quoteworks.com email, and we also have our tech support team, sales teams, and you can always give us a call at any time. And I know we just went over a bunch of questions, but I think I saw one come in here.
Yeah, so Michael has a question here. Does QuoteWerks for Web only integrate with Act for Web, or can it also integrate with Act Desktop?
All right, well, I always like to show things if I can. So if we come over here and look here, we do have an Act Desktop option, but it does not because it's actually currently supported in desktop. So while it's listed here, we don't have an option to actually go and set the settings, right? So something that likely will be added soon as it's included in the dropdown, but not currently.
Actually, let me jump in here real quick.
Okay.
All right. So basically, the reason that we have the ability to select Act Desktop in here is because if you use QuoteWerks Web, you still need it to be able to integrate with it when they swap back to QuoteWerks Desktop. So that's why that option is there. Unfortunately, when it comes to QuoteWerks Web, we're only going to be able to integrate with the web versions of CRMs or PSAs. That's just the way it works. We're in a browser. We got to talk to their endpoints out in the real world. So that's how that works. So yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. Appreciate it,
Yep.
Brian. All right. I don't see any additional questions here, but if anyone has any additional questions, you can feel free to reach out to, again, community@quoteworks.com, or you can always reach out to our team as well. So I want to thank everyone for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.